you. Okay, so I'm really happy to welcome you all back to the last panel today. So I'm really happy to welcome Kerstin, Angela, and Maria to the final panel. And I'll just introduce you, and then we can start. So Maria Bussmann is an artist whose works represent an insistent attempt to fathom the epistemological quality of her medium, drawing. Her work traditionally grows out of her relationship to reading and the generative force of philosophy and literature, as well as personal references such as temporary sites of residence. Having studied at the Academy of Fine Art in Nuremberg and Vienna, she graduated in philosophy and cultural studies from Vienna University. And second, we will have Angela Melitopoulos and Kerstin Schroedinger together. Very excited. Angela Melitopoulos is an artist based in Berlin who has made experimental video essays, installations, documentaries, and sound pieces since 1985. And Kerstin Schroedinger is an artist researcher who works in film, video, performance, and sound. Her historiographic practice questions the means of image production, historical linearities, and the ideological assumptions of representation. So amazing. So Maria, if you want to start.
Hello, everybody, for the last round here. It's so big, but should be okay. Well, take a virtual tour, Thoughts and Images for Marina. When Danny sent out the first plans for this conference, he wrote, "This conference will create a space to reflect on her contribution." I was not nearly aware of how much I would have to think and reflect about Marina in the last year. This had also personal reasons. About her presence as a new professor at the Art Theory Institute here, her work, and most of all, about her life and her early death. This introduction sounded a bit scary, but I'm also teaching here in the house a couple hours a week. My contribution will be, or is meant to be, a gesture of admiration and reverence. Also, I did not know Marina very well and for only a short time. So I'm not so sure if I'm really entitled to be here, but I had the need to do this somehow. So I will do it with my means, which are available to me, and this most of all as an artist and not as a theorist. In the final title, so, of the conference appeared the sentence, "Marina's concept of infrastructural critique towards aesthetics and political struggle in all of its interconnected modes and scales." I will take these modes and scales into a personal corner, even into a playful one, I hope, and invite you now to lean back and watch images. You have to expect about 50 images. Okay. Let's see. We do have two guests who follow the tour. They can be seen actually as critical spectators, but here they will change very quickly into two moons surrounding the planet Mars. Explanations will follow. Their names are Phobos and Deimos. Yeah, that's the picture of the NASA. All other pictures are from me. Phobos and Deimos are named after the sons of the war god Ares, the Greek equivalent, as most know, I guess, of the Roman god Mars. Phobos means fear and panic, and Deimos means dread or terror. Both names were chosen because they represented the emotions associated with battle and struggle. As we know, the red color of the Mars was associated with blood and wars. Earth and Mars are both surrounding the Sun in elliptical paths. The distance varies between the two from over 400 million kilometers to closest around 60 million kilometers. The most close was ever 54 million kilometers. Elon Musk wants actually, or plans for the next year, several Mars missions. So Mars was always also a place to make projections to. But Mars stands not only for war, it also represents energy, action, courage, aggression, assertiveness, and the drive to pursue goals, influencing how people deal with challenges and conflicts. These qualities are a bit nicer to attach to than the war and blood. Still, the moons surround the Mars. They are on a permanent move, day and night and day. This is a little model of the moons. To discover the true nature of Mars, we have actually to get a little closer, and we need the right equipment like a telescope. Looking through this glass telescope, we will find, let's say, the two moons looking at us in a different form. We also might need a space shuttle. The space shuttle could also have the form of a house of a soul maybe, with the soul as a small and even silly passenger traveling to another universe. But I'd like to begin with my first meeting with Marina, how it happened. My first contact with Marina was during the hearing process at the Angewandte. Her lecture impressed me right away. Some weeks later actually, a London-based friend of mine, Nika Dubrovsky, told me about her idea to re-establish a connection between the David Graeber Institute and Goldsmiths University. And Marina came from Goldsmiths. Nika, my friend, was actually married to David Graeber, who had passed away not too long ago in Venice, totally unexpectedly. I thought it would be nice to connect the two, Marina and Nika, and wrote to both. That was the first contact when I first contacted Marina, and I even thought of booking a cheap flight to London. Haven't been there since over, 28 years. Marina's answer came immediately. Dear Nika and Maria, how lovely and generous of you both, and thanks, Maria, for connecting us. I would be delighted to join you for dinner when Maria is in town. Maria, I remember your question very well, and I'm glad if my reply made some sense. All my best, Marina. I was flashed. I did not expect this because there were many questions at the conference when she had her paper, of course. My trip to London never happened because my flight was cancelled last minute or probably had never existed for the low price I had paid for it. But the email conversation between Marina and me continued. She asked me about my position at the Angewandte, about my contract. Nobody ever had done this before or cared about it. For her, it was important. So in April 2023, I had written to her about my position here as a lecturer, trying to explain that I was teaching one or sometimes two courses per semester since the year 2000 on a yearly contract with some interruptions. I had also told her that academic institutions, also art universities, seem to be from outside quite socially engaged, even liberal, but the forms of contracts are nevertheless still based on quite crazy rules and look more like a guide into a precarious life. The answer from Marina came on the same day. Dear Maria, indeed, that doesn't sound sustainable at all. The rule in the UK university system is that after 4 years of fixed term and precarious contracts, staff should be offered permanent work, but of course many universities find loopholes around this. Looking forward to gaining a clearer understanding of how things work at the Angewandte and how they can be improved as well. Getting to know the Works Council is something that is still on the horizon for me, for example. All my best, and until soon, Marina. So again, Marina had an interest in other people's work conditions, in other people's lives. And some days later, she would come even back to this and write, yes, I agree, it sounds to be better in the UK, but the levels of precarity are always growing. I think it's now something like 40% of all teaching at Goldsmiths is done by staff with no job security. I guess the use of fixed-term contracts is much more widespread in Europe, though again, there will be differences on how security and insecurity plays out, depending on position in the academic hierarchy. I think I will be with Danny arriving in August at the earliest, so I guess that we will arrive here during summer break. But we can schedule something when you are around. Both Danube, nature, and cooking sounds lovely. Numerous other emails followed. And I have really to say that I've almost never met such a nice person, simply put. But I did not forget to take you on a picture tour, so I must go on with my images. They come from a series which is a little bit amusing, I hope. It's called Lucy's Toys, and they refer actually to Hannah Arendt's book Vita Activa. So I show you some, and then I go on. Where's this baby now? There was a baby before. I don't know. I don't wait too long, you get an impression. So you don't have to understand all. But some is actually in, well, this is the geworfen sign from Heidegger, but well, let's see. Yeah, this is in English. The 3 basic mental activities: thinking, willing, judging. Yeah, and this, the feeling of sympathy and friendship as a gift, always good. So, but also the community. So, it's an older series. Well, what we have in common is, of course, the life. And this creature has, like, on the ears 2 things. You know, I picked these images in a way to please Marina if she would be here. So to have 2 lives, 2 forms of life, the Zoe, which is like the biological life and ends with the death, but also the other one, the bios, which is meaning also the quality of life. And we know it maybe from Hannah Arendt, the bios politikos, and this can be clearly associated with Marina. Also from biopolitics or Foucault or Butler, but I don't want to refer to this. In the end, we can think around things by being upside down sometimes, or by move, or by changing the position. There will still come other silly creatures. Penguin with birth and death. Some duck. Well, and this is the last one of this series. It's a chain. It more or less shows we all live subsidized lives. And now I show you 2 from another series, 2 images which are also in connection to pictures to Hannah Arendt, but they reminded me also of Marina. It's the sharpness of the needle, and also the bravery to risk a mouth, to speak out, to say something once it's needed. So I switch now to some others, but it repeats like the form of the needle, which is like a picture of a thought in the head. Also delicacy. Very fine stitches you almost don't feel, but they're there. This could be infrastructure, but it's between falling down and imaginations. And here we could think of an inner room. Like if you close your hand to a feast, you have some room inside that feast. Or if you think of your throat, you swallow something. That brings you really inside. You make a trip inside, but the outside, the inside, we will see in a second, is kind of connected. So now we're going to the outer space. Our trip will be soon cosmic. And for not to talk myself only, I would like to read some lines from Suleiman Bachir Diane's book, Philosophizing in Islam. Diane refers to a text from Avicenna from the 11th century, from our time. It's about a journey of the human spirit. The best illustration of this journey is Avicenna's philosophical reconstruction of one of the most important traditions in Islam, namely the story of the Prophet Muhammad's heavenly journey on which he meets God. The actual heavenly journey was preceded, so to speak, by the horizontal journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, which is mentioned in the 17th chapter of the Quran. It's also, I don't quote the Quran now, but it's also on another part. By going beyond the Quranic allusions, it is above all the tradition and a rich body of literature that embellish this heavenly journey with details and endlessly wave the story of the prophet who, riding a wondrous horse, a steed, and accompanied by the archangel Gabriel, travels to the holy city of Jerusalem. There he first prays with the prophets who came before him, and then ascends through the celestial spheres to the limits of understanding up to God himself. It is therefore not surprising that Islamic iconography has always found in this narrative an inexhaustible source of inspiration. This tradition undoubtedly appeals to the imagination, for intelligible realities must be closed in a figurative language in order to reach all types of minds, both those moved by the marvelous and those capable of grasping through the analogies presented to them the unrepresentable to which they point. End of story here. I liked very much how Diane expressed this kind of finding analogies, making journeys to other parts of being. I also looked for some kind of cosmic images here. Well, still we have to come back to the question of the infrastructural critique. Well, I tried to find an image for that. Maybe this. Actually, this drawing series referred to Merleau-Ponty's The Visible and Invisible, which is also very difficult to define. And what is so interesting about Merleau-Ponty is that he always tries it again and again, and the definition changes slightly and adds more qualities to it. So this was reminding me to Marina's search, in a way, to this permanent move. And as we see here, let's say that image was not alone. Here it is connected to all kinds of influences. It does not stand alone. And sometimes it's probably not important to understand all. You just get your own ideas about it without always having an explanation. Well, if we make that trip, so we are inside this spiral in a way, in that move, we should also come out at one point. Here's a gap. But the gap is filled actually with struggle also, or all kind of things, people. Some images we meet are more scary, and well, like this one, so many things are unsaid, or I cannot say them. Finally, we go out of our circle. This was an installation one time. I picked that image because the inside of the circle seems to be brighter than the outside. But it's an illusion. It's an optical illusion. It's not true. It was maybe more strong than you see here on the photo. In real, the inside looked very bright. So we cannot trust our eyes either. But let's go back to the Mars. At least to the parts of the Mars which arrive at the Earth, like the meteorites. You might have heard that at Sotheby's, one big part, about, I think it was the biggest meteorite, was just sold for $5.3 million. Truly amazing. But so this meteor stuff, well, it's hard to find on the Earth, of course. No? So here some more pictures from the Mars and how we get closer to it, sending all kind of machines there. And sometimes we wish we could send certain people also there permanently. So, and well, slowly we have to come back to the ground. Okay, we look to the telescope and we see the perfect infrastructure. This is like, it's like a community work of many. And wait, almost done. So this is like a city of dreams, or a kind of infrastructure of dreams. But as you see, as detailed as it is, you cannot build it alone. It's done. It's a work by many. Yesterday we heard it. Whatever we do it as many. But also the look through the telescope shows us again the struggle. We cannot get out of this, it seems. But sometimes struggle is already simply waiting in a waiting room, sitting in a hospital, and watching the flow of the life from birth to the end, waiting for it, waiting for the end. Sometimes there's like a last wild dance. But now let's take the rocket. The rocket. Yes, here it is. And go back to the ground. Oh, here they are. They are now modified. They are not moonish anymore. And here she is. Thank you, Marina, for having crossed my way, my street, and give me inspiration. As short as my encounter with her was a bit of a cosmic encounter, I should say. Sometimes the eclipses just meet very briefly, but still make a big impact. In Marina, I really met not only a great thinker, a great activist, but also a warm, kind, wonderful human. This is all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, so we also would like to thank very much for the invitation and how much we appreciate being here together with everyone. Yeah, to Annette and Sophia, of course, and also for Danny and Rose-Anne. and everyone else, of course. Yeah, and already being a bit overwhelmed with all this wonderful ideas that came to us today. Yeah.
Hello, dear all, and dear Marina. So meeting you here without having met in the past is a great task for me. I'm speaking here as a listener, as a reader of your text, and I could apprehend with Kerstin a little context of your life in London and Germany. I am impressed of your powerful weavings describing the fugitive machine of current capitalist powers. You're lying in wait, hunting and tracing it down, with spirits and with matters steaming from many, from activists, artists and philosophers. Infrastructural critique, whether in the visual arts or in the social political realm, is, as I believe, intuitively understandable as a mnemonic crystallization of the past. In operative images that are sharing imaginations, operative maps for a communal future. As a former collaborator, Maurizio Lazzarato and me stated in a work on machinic animism that made us tracing Felix Guattari's interest in the animist cosmologies in Brazil and in Japan, and the anthropological critique of the colonial Western gaze. Felix Guattari is concerned in all matters of modernity, such as in his own professional realm as a psychiatrist and philosopher, about the dividing categories of subject-object relations. He stated, there is something before the subject-object opposition, and we must start from their point of fusion. Guattari then preferred to speak of objectivity and subjectivity to mark their non-separation and their reciprocal implication. So what are subjectivities? UFOs? Or could objectivities become UFOs? In a certain sense, I would like to understand this way of putting into movement subjects and objects into a different perspective. I remember the amazement of the Brazilian anthropologist Viveiros de Castro when he explained to us the use of visual arts, or shall we say visual operations, in the culture of the Naravete in Brazil. He was more explicit about the understanding of how, for them, subjects are describing the action and the behavior of things, and then subjectivity is more a fusion of multiplicity and not of a description of unity as it is in Western science. This is close to Guattari's understanding of the machine as an entangled part in the production of our subjectivities that let us, Kerstin and me, attack the proto-machine of modernity, the train. The grand deterritorialization machine, not just as a matter of the Industrial Revolution and the war, that put into motion not only the workers of the world, who were forced to leave their homes, but also, on the other side, as an artistic and philosophical concept, the allied Kinoki forces that crystallized time in moving images. My own work on continuous traveling as a third-generation subject after World War I propelled my life on a continuity of being moved, which joins my understanding of the fluidity and of the passages as a geographically entangled understanding of a shifting subject. The inner world of the great deterritorialized, the migrant, whose stories can be accounted in the realm of archival weaving methods, in the editing of moving images. So in train rides per se, what one thinks and what one perceives is imbricated but differential. It is a gliding temporal setting of belonging and not belonging at the same time, one that does entangle bodies to extra bodies, constructed through the energetic and mechanical history of superstructures that are propelling us into a distant, moving, fast, and missing realm of disconnection. I sometimes think of Benjamin's spleen in Modern Spaces, his search for trance as a moment, enabling oneself to express thought that escape the overruling power systems of the socially hierarchized patriarchal realms of a place. Trance movements in trains allow a plane of consistency for an emerging subjectivity. Within that machinic proliferation, quite singular moments appear in that we can grasp a crystallized moment, allowing ourselves to reflect. Our project settles in the violent histories of geographic speculations in the beginning of the 20th century, where progress itself was a chimera. On the other side, the dream of the proletarian revolution imagined in the Kinoki arts of the Soviets and their understandings of a world-making that no longer counts on consistent temporalities emerged. Unfortunately, we are waking up in a very unpleasant continuation, and that the only power structure that holds people in check forced them to repeat exactly that what they really want to change through debt and through the debt crisis. As Lazzarato stated with the words of others, it is the imprisonment of a class through debt, like driving on a monotonous road of the Autobahn with no exit to be taken. A certain way of dying a life while living it. A starving matter making oneself a fixed subject with no potential to change, hellish. How was the machinic superstructure of the train that includes a history of wheel, of mechanics, of energetic transformations, the thing that is translating circular movement into linear ones? How can then this meta-object of progress become the kernel of the financial capitalist imperialism that Lenin analyzed so well in his book?
A memory in color. I met Marina not long after I moved to London in autumn of 2009 through our friend Caroline Menieux, who had introduced me to Cinenova and invited Mareike, my then collaborator, and me to select a film from the collection for the reproductive labor exhibition at the showroom, and shortly after I would become part of the Cinenova working group. The group and its precarious care for the collection would frame our friendship, but I was also drawn to Marina's writings and activisms around work, labor, the full unemployment cinema screenings, and the constant interweaving of life, work, cinema, the ways in which each of those permeates the others, and don't build different or same categories of being in the world or microcosms of social reality, but rather a practice of belonging through films, music, films again, and social gatherings, while also insisting on specificity. In the process of making Rainbow's Gravity in the spring-summer of 2012, we asked Marina to join us for a research trip to Wolfen near Bitterfeld in deep eastern Germany, heavy industrialized zone, where the Aqua Film Factory is located, the setting and topic of Rainbow's Gravity. It was a sort of experiment in the attempt to film a place, the film factory, that makes productive work invisible since it takes place in the dark, but also in a sort of strange chemical or molecular dissolution of the boundaries between the medium film, the industrialized product film, and the life captured on film, worked by film, and edited through the film apparatus. I would like to share some of the visual outcome of this research trip, and I hope to share also the funny awkwardness of these scenes. In the first part, we are recording a tour through the production line of the film factory, which is today a museum. The tour is given to us by two women who used to work in the film factory during the GDR. In the second part, you will see our attempt to transform the information about the body memory experienced and told to us by the two former film factory workers into an improvised choreography. And she was doing this because, so that she doesn't.
Ein bisschen warten, das sehe ich doch alles. Ja, ein bisschen warten. Die ist jetzt weg, wird die runtergenommen und wird hier reingehangen. So, und dann wird die eingefädelt, genau. Geholt so ein Stück, das wird eingefädelt. Also dann geht das hier so hoch, da springt die überall, die sind doch hier rumgesprungen.
Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf. Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf. Vier, fünf, eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, eins.
we jump from there to the scene from Dziga Vertov, the 11th year, from 1928. A film that I first watched together with Marina and others, a splinter group of the Full Unemployment Cinema at 113, the house at 113 Lordston Lane, where I lived at the time. So 1928, the year 11 since the October Revolution, shows the technical development. The film shows the technical development in the Ukraine along the river Dnipro. Recently returned to Vertov's film project in the context of Angela and my research project, Industries of Denial. Thinking and discussing between industrialized processes and infrastructural, virtually with Marina in mind, in the past weeks, being moved by her text, has been helpful insofar as we could understand how the industrialized implementation of the national project Denial, through repetition, ongoingness, contingency, and continuity, may manifest in a new practice we may call infrastructure.
So some thoughts to, you can leave it on a little bit sound, to the Kinoki from the book Video Philosophy by Maurizio. Kino eyes means the visual linkage of people throughout the entire world based on the continuous exchange of visible facts of cine documents as opposed to the exchange of cine theatrical representations. Cine sensations was interpreted by Vertov as a constitutive force. Cine linkage connecting the proletariat of all nations through audiovisual means, the Kinoki, the Kino eye, is an anticipation of television, digital and satellite networks. The mass character of cinema should not be limited to its distribution alone, but should also empathically include its production to ensure that its power of expression is not expropriated. Vertov's new proletariat was not just an ideological reference point, but primarily a new aesthetic and productive paradigm of assemblage. The factory instead of the theater, the cyborg of collective worker, and the assemblage of human and machine instead of purely subjective representation. Vertov always reminds us that new technological assemblages demand the creation of new collective assemblages of enunciation. In order to safeguard all the promises that they periodically announce, these machines for seeing and thinking must remain open to all other semiotics and to all other forms of subjectivity and temporality that the multitude and the cosmos express.
Vertov interpreted the Soviet Revolution not only as the general collapse of power and of capitalist institutions in Russia, but also as a collapse of the human and its world. Cinema was immediately understood as a mechanic expression of forces assembled in different ways with human forces such as seeing, feeling, perceiving, and thinking, capable of opening up new forms of subjectivation. These forces of the outside that capitalism brings to the foreground are, in the first place, forces of time and of the virtual that can be located within machines that crystallize time as powerful means of expression. From Vertov's interpretation of the Soviet Revolution, constructing a new world that is built upon the ruins of the capitalist and feudal system of the 19th century, we do not want to give a short-sighted analysis of contemporary finance capitalism, but rather look at today's forms of denialism through the lens of the interpretation of 100 years ago. Because we look at the repeating structures of a systematic denial and the structural violence, displacement, and genocide in the construction and formation of nation-state after the breakdown of the imperial states in World War I, particularly on the Ottoman Empire and its entanglement with the German Reich.
Just to remember, in Lenin's most famous work on imperialism, The Highest Stage of Capitalism from 1916, he develops his theories on how financial capitalism in the beginning of the 20th century leads to an aggressive form of imperialism. Especially, he showed how the German banks and railway industries are entangled in the example of the Deutsche Bank. In Lenin's analysis of capitalist economies, railway is viewed as a crucial part supporting capitalist expansion. He saw the building of railways as an essential component of industrial development, but also as something that reflected deeper contradiction in capitalism. Railways were not purely private enterprises, but were heavily supported or directly managed by the state. The capitalist state would often intervene to support monopolization of industries and to ensure the growth and profit for capitalist infrastructures. The development of railways was a central machine of capital. Large capitalist enterprises, including railway companies, became monopolies, and these monopolies consolidated power within the hands of a few. The dominance of monopolistic cooperation and the concentration of finance capital through large banks and industries controlled the economy, and they needed to expand abroad to maintain their profits, especially in colonial territories or new industrial regions. This process was, in Lenin's view, the hallmark of imperialism in the final stage of capitalism. So now I jump for an excerpt on an infrastructural research project from 2006 that was created between 2003 and 2006, where this Vertov's concept of the Kinoki was somehow important, but was emphasized in the relation between geography and collective memory after the Yugoslavian war in Southeast Europe. So the project was shown in Berlin in the KW. It was called The B-Zone, Becoming Europe and Beyond. And it was a larger project including works of Ursula Bussmann and Lisa Parks on infrastructural expansion of the European Union at the time. I made this double-screen movie, road movie Corridor X, that is a migration route connecting Germany with Greece and Turkey. But also the title, Corridor X is also the title of the 10th Trans-European Transport Network, TENT, which was part of the Trans-European Expansion Project, started in 1993. It highlights the EU expansion politics through infrastructure, but it recalls the business model of the Baghdad Railway at the end of the 19th century.
Under the shield of German foreign policy, Bismarck granted authority to a consortium of industrialists and bankers to begin planning a railway line through Anatolia to Baghdad. the German Reich approved and supported this nascent form of public-private partnership. The Deutsche Bank Consortium signed a contract with the Ottoman rulers, which in 1912 culminated in a concession in which this private cooperation enjoyed what amounted to territorial sovereignty. Deutsche Bank received a right-of-way along the railway line on 20 kilometers on either side as far as Mosul, and the rights to all oil and mineral deposits. And the wages of the laborers required to build the line were contractually set at bread and water. In October 1914, the Ottoman government, as cooperation partner, began to draft Armenian men aged between 16 and 60 as laborers. The last Armenians killed in the 1916 genocide were forced laborers on the Baghdad railway who were hastily buried beside the tracks.
Bevor sich filmen lässt, hat die Dienstjacke ausgezogen. Nicht ohne Grund. Denn sein Lied erzählt vom Eigensinn eines Soldaten. Ja, es handelt vom Widerstand.
Let's play. We play another excerpt of Corridor X, which shows more or less the copy of this business model of the Baghdad Railway in the 1993 expansion of infrastructure in Europe as a Maastricht program. So let's see if this works with the sound.
At the beginning of the wars in Yugoslavia in 1992, European Union member states agreed to build up trans-European networks and harmonize infrastructure throughout the EU. The opening of borders to free passage of persons and goods should help to guarantee the economic and social cohesion of the European domestic market. It is an instrument the EU hopes will spur economic growth and employment. The Trans-European Transport Networks, TENT, primarily consists of 10 corridors. Corridors are not only superhighways, but also railway lines, harbors, waterways and pipelines. Corridor 3 across Eastern Europe is now being planned to extend to China.
Under the Europe Agreement, we agreed under the French presidency to spend 4.65 billion in the Western Balkans between 2000 and 2006. We will actually
The trans-European networks comprise 3 sectors: transport, energy and telecommunications. According to current estimates, the completion of these networks through public-private partnerships will cost some 400 billion euros. It requires investment in research and international organizations of experts, as well as the improvement of financial institutions in collaboration with the European Investment Bank.
I will just resume this clip. Let's say there is 10 corridors that the European Union was planning. That's why it's called Corridor 1 to 10. And they have different roads and different pipelines and different communication structures. So it's not just infrastructure for trains and road. It is also looking at energy flows, energy, telecommunications, satellites, so all the different levels of infrastructure. This is the main machine of European expansion. With this machine comes the building of expertise, of banks in all the main cities along that corridor. And this is somehow meaning it is changing completely the social productive context of this area. Okay, so this is the main operation of the European Union in terms of expansion, and it thinks its expansion today until China. So Corridor 3 goes from Berlin to China in that sense. So what is along that is that not only the social cultural systems of production are changed, but also the relation to minority politics are changed. And this is what we are looking at when we look at the industries of denial and the minority histories that were suppressed by the German-Turkish alliance since the Berlin conferences. So this alliance had contributed to genocidal politics by the Young Turks and the German Reich, and is still operative as a national cultural homogenization factor in the Middle East. Denialism as a strategy constructs position of power through the assertion of truth and its negation. It is, for example, the denial of facts, historical events, or social contexts. The producibility of facts and the dissolution of communities have become operative in the current structures of governance. In post-genocide Turkey, this is used to exercise control over historical narratives by negating truth about the ethnical cleansing and cultural erasures. Denialism is a base monopolizing industries, leading to impoverishment and to militarize borders, for example, the border along the Baghdad Railway.
In the project Industries of Denial, we are faced with denialism as the ongoing overarching mechanisms that keeps the catastrophe of the Minor Asia genocides in the first quarter of the 20th century an open wound, an ongoing transgression, and repeating violation across generations, classes, landscapes, countries. And we attempt to understand that infrastructure, and in particular the building of railroads by the German Reich, not only contributed to the systematic negation of the people in the building of nation states, in this case Turkey, but through denying the people themselves, the notion there have never been people here as such, and their histories as such, and the denial of the mourning, the denial of loss, the denial of traces and paths through the landscapes. The notion that the denialist states there have never been people here refers to the missing people. The missing people here quoted from Deleuze. He continues the speech act with these nourishing sentences. The moment the master or the colonizer proclaims there have never been people here, the missing people are a becoming. They invent themselves in shanty towns and camps or in ghettos, in new conditions of struggle to which the necessary political art must contribute.
So the denialism of the Armenian genocide, the practice of denialism in regard to mass atrocities is usually thought as a simple denial of the facts, but that's not true. Rather, It is in that nebulous territory between facts and truth where such denialism germinates. Denialism marshals its own facts and it has its own truth. Turkish denialism in regard to the event of the First World War is perhaps the most successful example of how the well-organized, deliberate and systematic spreading of falsehoods can play an important role in the field of public debate, employing factual statements to construct a false truth. Those who abide the dictum, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts, have followed with amazement the public and historical debates over the Armenian genocide over the past decades, where the fact-based truth have been discredited and relegated to the status of mere opinions. The Ottoman authorities had to organize the entire deportation extermination process, especially under the scrutiny of Germany and the United States. The Ottoman depended on German military and financial support and wanted that the Americans should be kept as a neutral power. So Tana Acham, a historian who is working in Santa Cruz, is citing Michel Rolf Trouillot as very relevant to this issue because he made a kind of a structure or infrastructure of denial. Silence has entered the process of historical production at 4 crucial moments. He wrote, the moment of fact creation, the making of sources, the moment of fact assembly, the making of archives, the moment of fact retrieval, the making of narratives, and the moment of retrospective significance, the making of history in the final instance. And to these, Tana Acham would add the moment of destroying or attempting to disprove the authenticity of critical documents. The Armenian case is unique among genocides in the long-standing efforts to deny its historicity and thereby hide the truth surrounding it. Another characteristic of this century of denialism is that it has been an inherent component of the genocide since the beginning of the events themselves. In other words, the denial of the Armenian genocide began not in the wake of the massacres, but was intrinsic part of the plan itself. In other words, what Trouillot has described as the moment of fact creation, the making of sources, began, if not earlier, on April 25th, 1915, which serves as the symbolic date marking the beginning of the Armenian genocide.
And to conclude, we will show now some archival photographs that we work with. Denialism is very efficient in erasing mnemonic knowledge, which once it is lost cannot be regained. The inability to mourn led to a horrific manifestation in contemporary societies. People had been over and over displaced. Their deteriorated memory manifested in a sort of insensitivity towards the others, the previous ones, the past ones, the lost ones. We started digging as if we were mnemonic archaeologists, digging for visual traces and photochemical residues created as side products while serving their purpose. Observing the building of the railways, documenting archaeological finds, surveying territories in military operation during World War I, and archiving the planet, as is the title of the Albert Kahn project. These photographic operations in the decline of the Ottoman Empire created a conflict of interest with the attempts of erasing and denying what had happened. Thus, they were forbidden. But numerous images existed and persisted. Our accumulated collection of archival photographs from several sources reveals them as mostly unintentionally, accidentally witnesses of the genocidal atrocities that happened in the region before, during, and after World War I. In some instances, they make even more apparent how denialism operates in current so-called post-truth circumstances. Some archival records have been denounced many times, some films have been prevented of being made, or all their copies have been destroyed or lost. So for the accidental witnesses, it seems to be easier to survive denialism. This image here now we found in the German National Archives and the archives of the Foreign Office, the Bavarian military archives, and they bring us sources recorded by the military showing possible Armenian slave workers someone we spoke to in the German Orient Institute in Istanbul called the slave workers euphemistically Bausoldaten, construction soldiers. And this is another famous archival photograph picture. I will finish. Just to say that this actually shows also the relation of the Baghdad Railway to the deportation of Armenians. So they were not only enslaved to build the railway, but also then transported with the railway into the Syrian desert. The German historian Hilmar Kaiser noted on this picture, thus the Ottoman government introduced into modern history railway transport of civilian populations towards extermination.
So this is an image here.
Yeah, you can see this.
This image shows the exodus of the Ottoman Greeks in 22 in Adrianople, what is today Edirne. It is also from the archive of the Planet, which is a very interesting project of Albert Kahn, but that is another chapter. But let's say, to resume, industry self-denial looks at banks, trains, imperial investment objects rushing into an orientalist phantasmagorical imagination of an East that never had existed, that always was a much too diverse cosmos for being propelled into progression of a monotonous societal construction, allowing speculation, death, war, and genocide become the fundamental machine of Western capitalist imperial societies. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. We had really, they were very different papers, but maybe I'll try to weave some connections. And I was thinking about the kind of question of, in Maria, in your work, the translation of thoughts into images, or this kind of, and perhaps the way that you're figuring Mars, because Mars is also this kind of fantasy, like a fantasy realm that is functioning in the present in very like interesting and bizarre ways. So obviously there's like a huge mountain on Mars called Olympus Mons, which is the size of Poland, which is the like largest mountain in the universe, and yeah, and and it's very interesting because it's when you had this image of the what's the word? Telescope looking at Mars with this kind of like fantasy of perfect infrastructure, and in reality Mars is like minus 87 degrees or something, and it's very, very toxic and sharp, and everything that would touch the ground would break or something. So it's very, very uninhabitable. So it's very interesting that there's this kind of that Elon Musk has this fantasy that, you know, planet B is going to be Mars or something. So maybe there's something about the role of the imagination, or also in Marina's work, the kind of the thought as an infrastructure that I was thinking about in relation to your work, and obviously in your work we have this question, and you also brought up this image of silence, and in your work you really raised this kind of question of an infrastructure of denial, which we also heard in Danny's presentation yesterday. Which I think is so crucial for like really thinking about in relation to today, and potentially it's also disavowal, or it's denial and disavowal. And you kind of used the train as the motor of this, both as a kind of necropolitical infrastructure, right, that has existed historically to produce these necropolitical circumstances, but also as a like motor, as a motor of capitalist infrastructure, imperialist infrastructure. I'm like trying to on the spot think of a question to kind of like pose, but maybe you'd like to say some words, or maybe just say some words about this question of infrastructure repeating across time in relation to your ideas of silence and denial, and maybe this for you, Maria, this question of fantasy and
Yeah, you said it. It's a journey of fantasy, and Mars in this case is an object of fantasy. And well, I work on this Mars project since a while, but I had to trick a bit to make it match with something for Marina. But I hope it worked somehow. There's also to send people to the Mars, and to use it as a standpoint from outside completely. So it was a fantasy tour, fantasy trip, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I was maybe now drawn to because you started talking about the train again. One is the journey, of course, but the other one is maybe the filmic or the cinematic. That I thought it was because I felt a bit like we're watching it had this kind of sequential part of like a road movie. Yeah. And in that sense, that was actually maybe the connection I could make with our train rides, and in that sense, I wanted to mention something that Marwa said in her talk about saying like, now I make a jump cut, and it made me immediately think of this. In the introduction, Danny, you write about this Marina jumping the barriers in the metro in New York, which is it's like it becomes the metaphor, for this book where we follow her jumping these barriers over and over. And so I was, Marwa, when you said jump cut, I was immediately thinking of this jumping the barrier and how we kind of jump from jumping around, basically. But yeah, this kind of cinematic or filmic time-based.
That's a nice thing about the conference. You don't know the other papers on first view, so it's a surprise. And it's also astonishing how many different angles we already heard just today.
Yeah, maybe I can add something quite opposite to this in that sense, where you talk about imagination and fantasy and things. And with Vertov, or the example of Vertov with the construction of the revolution, where they say something as the Soviet subject can be constructed through infrastructure. And with the project that I couldn't show you because it didn't work, the video, but let's say you can see a parallel image production in the editing studios of a European conference, and train. So signals, information, and histories are actually constructed through infrastructure. And the problem that we encountered in Timescapes, it was a collective editing project with 5 different people from different areas in Southeast Europe, that we can find that the thinking is constructed. It is not that that it is astonishing, even working with artists who are having quite good methodologies to work their mind, how much the perspectives, for example, from the east to the west or from the west to the east are constructed in a certain sense. So it is not so individual. So it's maybe interesting to think about that in terms of infrastructure, or what infrastructure means in that sense, right? So infrastructure means for me that also that there is a kind of there is a constructed level of a mindset or of a way of thinking through media, of course, constructed through media streams, and so on, which is the topic of repetition, propaganda, and so on and so on. But to escape from there means to embrace a very precarious life in a certain sense. So to really put yourself outside of what is demanded of you to perform as a repetition in order to sustain the death politics of our societies in that sense, right? So it's quite crucial for me to think along this terms infrastructure in that sense, and with our project to come to something that has exceeded by far our understandings of how much denialism is constructed as in parallel and at the moment of genocide itself, or at the moment of death politics itself. It is part of the construction as war and war deployment is constructed in parallel with the media. So it's not just the military, it is also the television, the media outlets and so on that are participant or who are participating in this warfare.
Yeah, are there any questions? Yeah, there's a question here. Maybe if people in the audience have questions, please raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you for amazing day and also the last part. I was wondering with what you said, this constructing of a story, it reminded me of this founding myth of cinema, of like this moment of arrival of the train that became a myth that people were scared. And I was wondering if you have more information, because if I remember correctly, that it was first a German newspaper, the Spiegel, that actually brought this myth on, and it was then repeated in the Deutsche Bahn's like catalogs. And I was wondering while you were explaining this, if this has also a bit to do with this projection of like this fear of like this thing of the, how to frame it, the naivety of the spectators of the cinema at that moment where the cinema was, but then also projecting this image of the people in the South confronting this Western colonialist like project. And then also, the train that is coming is a train that is connected. I don't know the name of the company, but it's loaned to France by Belgium, and it is through the colonial construction of the Congo genocide. Again, also coming back to now of the September contract that was EU and US delegation of like rebuilding new for the trade of the coltan, while another like a continuous genocide is happening in Congo. I was wondering how can one like connect all of this back to that moment of the myth of cinema and back to the cinema, and yeah, maybe you can elaborate more.
No, I just wanted to say something about that the construction of truth, or the way we understand the construction of truth, is also very interesting to look at anthropology in that sense, and to see that perhaps the way of understanding the real, or the what is around us, or the outside of us in that sense, is very, very different in different cultures. So to come to one understanding of okay, that's a cinema image that is not hurting me, or to that type of myth, as you call it, is the result of historical narrative in a certain sense that is propagated again and again, but also erasing a lot of other capacities and potentiality to view what is around us, what is the outside, what is in other cultures who would perhaps not really be, those who jump off the chairs when they go into a cinema screening. We don't know, but I would say that there are many other possibilities.
This will be like a comment, and then maybe this might lead to a question. So I came to Germany to study art, and when I was at the UDK, and when I found out actually that Steinplatz on Heidenbergstraße was actually the point actually where Talat Pasha was assassinated, was Talat Pasha was assassinated was striking to me. I didn't know, and then also the history of that Steinplatz related to migration politics of Prussian Empire and also Germany. So this is maybe a question. So knowing actually that also Taner Akçam used this infrastructure of telegrams as the footprints of the genocide, and also knowing actually that some German cultural institutions in Istanbul, namely Tarabya Cultural Academy, which hosts actually some of the perpetrators of some of these engineers of violence. In your work in the archives in Germany, do you think there are interesting moments actually where we can maybe dissect, talk about where you feel that there's an exit, there is a gap to think about, because I feel like these industries of denialism continues and is expanded into Germany, and so starting maybe from Tarabya Cultural Academy.
Yeah, so we started the project when we were actually also residents in the Tarabya, and it was, so to say, to go to the belly of the beast, because there is there's a military cemetery on this grounds, and it's the summer residence of the German ambassador in Turkey, and it was given as a present by Sultan Abdulhamid II in 1895, and it was expropriated from Greek people who lived there in the area. So it's basically the belly of the beast names it quite accurately, and then it was also interesting for us, of course, to understand what is there now, and it's like this kind of quite fancy artist residency, and artists are invited to relate to something in Turkey, and when you start to work there and say, okay, and what about the German involvement in the Armenian genocide, it becomes, you have to get like permissions to film, and you start asking questions. You go to the German Archaeological Institute and ask for pictures, and then they say, oh no, there are none, and then you see a book where there is a lot of pictures, and it's like and then they say, no, these images are in Germany, they're not here, and it's like it's a constant deferral, or also maybe entropic, I don't know, but it's like bringing this kind of looping moment of time. You spend there, and you get like sent to the next place, and it becomes this kind of also bureaucratic challenge. So, and then of course, what I find also quite difficult is that these images that we find in the German archives, of course, there are also like colonial or sources, and also perpetrator sources. So and that's not easy to, we don't want to reproduce certain gazes, but we look at certain other parts in the image, or we find it important to understand what we're actually looking at, and so I think what is actually most interesting is when we find images that, as I said, they are like accidentally pointing the camera somewhere else. So they're not only photographing the tunnel the bridge being built, but also the people who stand there and are devastated because they have to work there. I think, so that's why I also mentioned that it's like an archaeological kind of work of or excavation. Can I say something again?
Okay. So all the institutions are implicit in this texture, right? I mean, also in their critical stance towards the whole story. But it becomes more acute, or when you for example, talk about archaeology in Turkey. Okay, we spoke with archaeologists who are going to the most important archaeological sites on the border between Syria and Turkey, where there is Tel Halaf and all these very important. So they are. This is the same sites of the mass graves of the Armenian genocide. So the archaeologists, they are digging, and sometimes they find bones of victims from the genocide. When they do that, there is an immediate control and complete suppression of facts immediately. And any archaeologist who would dare to even write one page about that finding is not going to enter Turkey again in order for his future archaeological research. It's absolutely strict, and the archival state of documents, as it is written in many books by now. You know, the book that we showed is published in 1915. It took them 100 years to write that book. Okay, 100 years, and it was in the 80s and in the 90s that German Tessa Hoffmann and others have written about the denial in Germany, in the German archives, of the erasure politics in the German archives, because there were attempts to make that public, like Wegner and other. So there was things to bring it out, but the machine was absolutely, strict of erasure, of erasing. So nowadays, perhaps we have to ask, okay, is that possible? How is it possible today? We have an online genocide. What is this? And there is a shift. And there's an important shift insofar as all the books that are most important, like Ben Morris' book on the 30-year genocide, and these books that are published in the last 10 years, when they have, when the archives of the world have connected in ways that were not controlled or not controllable in that sense. And most of the construction of these facts are very, very meticulous and laborious research works on local newspapers, archive with very small, detailed informations and so on. As an amazing work, but it's only the last years that these things are becoming more strong and not erasable anymore in that sense. Okay, so now, okay, we have it online, and nobody needs to erase nothing. So we are entering a new phase in a certain way, which is not brings not much more comfort in that sense. It's like more blunt.
Do we have time for one more question? Yeah, which is here. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's really nice to see your artistic practice together with the thinking of Marina. And I have a questions concerning the temporal aspect of your work. I mean, three of you. And the questions is actually come from Angela and Kerstin. You are talking about the Gilles Deleuze are talking notion of crystal time in the cinema, and as I understand, my understanding on this crystal time, he mentioned is kind of like a suspension of the time in the cinema viewing, when we understand the time in the cinema, which is not linear anymore, but it's suspended by way of seeing cinematically, and at that moment he called the modern cinema after Second World War, that nobody knows to which direction that we want to go. And back to your practice, what kind of temporality of your filmic and also drawing visual practice together with the infrastructural critique, and especially this temporal time? Thank you.
I have one. Did I make it off? It's on. Super. Yeah, thank you for the question, for your patience, for all. I have to admit, I'm already a little tired now too. Well, my practice as an artist in this broader sense of infrastructural borders, I mean, I'm a living example somehow to resist everything and to find my way. So in a certain sense, I struggle with infrastructure since I'm born and try to find my way with the, I would say, as much freedom as is possible, because this is something very important, you know, and clearness of your mind and your ideas, just to develop your own things, you know. But the infrastructural critique was not brought to me before Marina, I have to say. So I make things fit around in a way, but it's very inspiring. So this is my practice. I try to profit from her also, and to include her ideas into mine. But I'm also a victim of all the infrastructure, or I can say I have to make the best out of it.
Yeah, I think you can probably answer it better, but also I wanted to say that we're working on this film, so we're basically trying to crystallize. So that's why also we would spend too much time, we would talk too much, and we have too much information at the moment. So we are in the process of crystallizing.
As for me, the central practice of dealing with all of that is editing, image editing. So in editing, for me, is a form of time composition or stretching time or making it more compressed, which refers to some sort of mnemonic process in the brain, which we do also without video or without a camera. We do something like that. We take a moment and expand it, or we compress the time. So it is some technology which has to do with our own capacity of perceiving things. So this is for me a cinematic or even videomatic thing. Editing, there is a crystallization process going on, which is very crucial. When we come to the point of having too much information or too much available information or not enough information or so on, so this is a tool, and this is a tool of thinking our world today. And this is what we said before when we cited Vertov, when he thinks that it needs to have we don't have to leave the field of expressions to industries who don't want us to talk, in that sense that he hoped for many people be participating in the process of producing these films. Now the Kinocchio films should be done by many in that sense, and this is something that we can face today in a different way, where people could do all kind of filmic statements and so on, and maybe they do, and we have to see if we have still the capacity to crystallize time with that practice, or maybe not. I cannot answer this, but let's say there was some sort of a promise that we could understand our world through these technologies, and it's not a question of art in that sense, or something which is expelled from the cultural realm in that sense into a higher way of doing things, but it's like the art field, right? So it's something which is more vital for everyone to live in a society that is full of these agents of propaganda, of media streams, of the forming of the mind through I don't know what. So we need to have tools to respond or to deal with that. And that's for us, or for me, myself, it was the electronic moving image that I used. So even it ended up in some sort of art, but it is beyond that in a certain sense. So there is something which has to do with that's why I asked about the mental health issue in terms of institutionalization of institutes in that sense, because I think it is it's a question like Guattari wrote, the couch of the poor. Maybe better. The cinema is maybe better than the therapeutical relation to a psychiatrist. It's called the couch of the poor. It's not expensive, so everybody can go there and so on. But I think it's more vital in that sense.
Great. So, okay. So that I'd really like to thank all of you so much. And also thanks everyone for coming. And we'll start again tomorrow at 10:30.